Have you ever wondered what would happen if the greatest threat to human civilization was already moving toward us, and almost nobody truly understood the scale of the danger? Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that decades ago, hidden deep inside classified calculations and silent observatories, scientists detected something that could change the future of Earth forever. This is not a movie scenario or science fiction, but a cold mathematical possibility buried beneath layers of public reassurance. According to one controversial alternative theory, humanity may have already crossed paths with a cosmic threat powerful enough to rewrite the future of our planet. If that theory is even partially correct, then the story you are about to hear is deeply unsettling. Most people move through life believing the sky above them is calm, predictable, and constantly monitored by systems designed to protect us. We trust that if a dangerous asteroid was heading toward Earth, governments and scientific institutions would immediately sound the alarm. But this alternative narrative presents a much darker idea, suggesting that behind locked doors, a discovery was made that quietly terrified the people responsible for monitoring the heavens. According to the theory known as the 3IA Atlas Tracking Matrix, the countdown began on June 19, 2004. Deep inside an observatory in Arizona, researchers scanning the night sky reportedly detected what first appeared to be another harmless object drifting through space. At first, it was treated like countless other fragments of ancient debris floating through the solar system. Within hours, automated tracking systems noticed something unusual. A tiny point of light was moving against the background stars with an irregular trajectory that did not match ordinary patterns. The moment scientists began calculating its future path, the atmosphere inside the room reportedly changed completely. The first projections revealed something almost impossible to accept, showing a 1 in 300 chance that this object could collide directly with Earth. To the average person, that number may sound distant, but in the world of planetary defense, those odds are terrifying. Normally, near-Earth objects carry impact probabilities so small they are practically meaningless, often 1 in a million or lower. Those tiny odds allow humanity to sleep peacefully at night, but this object was different. As more observatories around the world turned their telescopes toward the incoming anomaly, scientists expected the danger level to decrease. Historically, further observations almost always reduce the threat, because orbital calculations become more precise over time. According to this theory, the exact opposite happened. The probability began rising, slowly at first, then with alarming speed. By the end of that year, the numbers reportedly reached a level that stunned even experienced researchers. Refined calculations suggested a 1 in 37 chance of direct impact with Earth. If you played a deadly lottery 37 times, statistically, catastrophe would eventually happen once. Suddenly, this was no longer an abstract scientific discussion hidden inside academic journals, but a potential global emergency. The object was allegedly elevated to level 4 on the Torino scale, an international system used to measure asteroid threats. Such a designation represents a serious and unprecedented level of concern. According to this alternative interpretation, that moment triggered silent protocols inside governments and space agencies around the world. Publicly, almost nothing changed, and life continued normally. But privately, researchers and analysts were forced to confront a terrifying question. What if the calculations were right? To understand why this object created so much fear, you have to picture its true scale. Speculative estimates suggest the anomaly measures roughly 370 meters across. That may sound manageable until you visualize an enormous skyscraper made of iron and stone laid flat across the ground, or 4 football fields connected end to end moving silently through the darkness of space. This was not believed to be a loose collection of rubble that would burn apart harmlessly in Earth's atmosphere. According to the theory, it was a dense, solid body composed of metallic iron and hardened silicate material. That distinction changes everything. Smaller objects often explode high in the atmosphere before reaching the surface, but a coherent metallic structure behaves differently. It becomes a giant high-speed projectile carrying unimaginable kinetic force. The speed involved is almost beyond human comprehension, estimated at nearly 67,000 miles per hour relative to Earth. At that velocity, it could cross the entire continent of North America in less than 4 minutes. The energy stored inside a mass moving that fast is difficult to imagine, with calculations suggesting an impact would release roughly 1,700 megatons of force. That is around 80,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Physics does not care about borders, politics, wealth, or military power. The laws of motion recognize only mass and velocity, and those values alone are powerful enough to disrupt the stability of the biosphere itself. Yet, the object itself may not even be the only danger. Supporters of the 3IA Atlas theory claim the real threat lies within hidden gravitational zones and resonance corridors scattered throughout the solar system. These invisible pathways can subtly alter the motion of massive objects over time, creating future trajectories that are incredibly difficult to predict with complete certainty. Critics argue these claims are exaggerated, but believers insist the risks have been consistently downplayed. If such a body ever struck land, the sequence of destruction would unfold with brutal precision. Traveling faster than tens of thousands of miles per hour, the object would superheat the surrounding atmosphere before impact, creating temperatures similar to the surface of stars. The collision itself would excavate a massive crater deep into the Earth's crust, while unleashing shock waves capable of flattening entire regions. Fires would spread across hundreds of miles, seismic waves would ripple through the planet, and millions of tons of debris would rise into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and potentially triggering years of agricultural collapse. An impact in the open ocean sounds less dangerous at first, as most people imagine that if a massive asteroid avoided land and crashed into deep water instead, humanity might escape the worst-case scenario. According to this alternative framework, the ocean could actually transform the collision into a disaster that spreads destruction across entire continents within hours. To understand why, you first have to forget everything you know about ordinary waves. This would not resemble a hurricane surge or even a powerful tsunami generated by earthquakes. The object described in the theory is traveling at nearly 67,000 miles per hour, and at that speed, the laws of normal water movement stop behaving in familiar ways because the ocean simply cannot react fast enough to absorb the blow safely. The moment the massive body strikes the surface, it does not gently slow down or skip across the water, but punches directly through the ocean like a giant armor-piercing shell. Within seconds, it drives toward the seabed while transferring unimaginable energy into the surrounding water column. The force released in that instant behaves more like a massive underwater nuclear detonation than a natural event. A pulse of energy begins racing outward in every direction across the ocean basin. Far from the coastline, this moving wall of energy would barely be visible from the surface. Ships floating above it might notice almost nothing unusual at first, but beneath them, an enormous amount of kinetic force would already be traveling silently through the deep ocean at speeds comparable to commercial aircraft. That is the terrifying part about deep water impact scenarios, as the danger moves quietly at first. As the wave approaches continental shelves near coastlines, everything changes dramatically. The shallow ocean floor begins slowing the forward movement of the water, while the trapped energy has nowhere to go except upward. Slowly, the invisible force compresses vertically into an expanding wall of water, rising higher and higher as it nears land. What reaches the shoreline is not a normal wave with a curling crest, but a moving elevation of the sea itself. Entire coastlines would watch the ocean suddenly rise and continue rising without stopping. Flood barriers would fail almost instantly, while ports, highways, power grids, and coastal cities could disappear beneath fast-moving water within minutes. According to speculative models connected to this theory, some regions could experience waves pushing miles inland depending on local geography and water depth. Every nation bordering the affected ocean basin would face destruction in sequence as the pulse continued, spreading outward hour after hour. Unlike a direct land impact, which devastates one region most severely, an ocean strike distributes catastrophe internationally. This introduces another disturbing question. Does modern civilization even possess the coordination necessary to respond to a disaster unfolding across multiple continents simultaneously? The theory argues that it does not, because modern infrastructure was never designed for synchronized planetary emergencies. Supply chains operate under fragile timing systems. Financial markets depend on uninterrupted satellite communication, and transportation networks require stable coastlines and functioning ports. Remove those systems even briefly, and the consequences begin multiplying faster than governments can react. According to the 3IA framework, the danger does not stop at the surface of the Earth. In fact, some researchers believe the most immediate threat during a close approach may exist high above our heads, hidden within the orbital infrastructure that powers modern civilization itself. Official scientific projections associated with this object reportedly estimated a closest approach distance of around 19,000 miles from Earth. That number may sound enormous until you compare it to the satellites orbiting above the planet right now, where key systems operate. Many of the systems responsible for global communications, weather forecasting, military coordination, internet synchronization, and financial timing operate within orbital regions extending roughly 22,000 miles from Earth's surface. In other words, according to this scenario, the object would pass directly through the outer technological shell surrounding the planet. For the average observer standing outside at night, the flyby would likely appear beautiful as a bright moving point, crossing slowly through the stars over several hours. Families might gather outside to watch it drift silently overhead, unaware of the deeper fears unfolding inside command centers and observatories around the world. Behind closed doors, planetary defense analysts would be focused on something else entirely: gravity. As the massive object passed close to Earth, the planet's gravitational field would bend its trajectory and permanently alter its orbit around the Sun. Even a tiny adjustment during a close flyby can completely reshape the future path of an asteroid over decades. According to the theory, this is where the real nightmare begins. Scientists refer to certain microscopic regions in space as gravitational keyholes. These are incredibly small corridors where a passing object can be nudged into a future collision course through orbital resonance. If an asteroid passes through one of these invisible gates during a close encounter, Earth's gravity effectively sets a trap for the future. Supporters of the 3IA Atlas theory claim the greatest danger is not the first flyby itself, but what comes after it. If the object were shifted into the correct resonance pattern, its orbit could eventually synchronize with Earth's position around the Sun. That synchronization would create the conditions for a future return encounter far more dangerous than the original path. According to the theory, one projected timeline points toward the year 2068 as a possible future crisis point. Mainstream scientific models strongly reject the idea of any confirmed impact scenario and argue that future tracking data will continue reducing uncertainties over time. This alternative framework insists the public is being shielded from deeper levels of uncertainty connected to long-term orbital prediction. One major concern involves the Yarkovsky effect, a subtle force created when sunlight heats an asteroid unevenly and causes tiny changes in its movement over decades. Those small thermal pushes may sound insignificant, but over long enough periods, they can shift trajectories by enormous distances. According to believers in this theory, that means no prediction should ever be treated as absolutely permanent. The unsettling reality is that human civilization exists inside a cosmic shooting gallery far larger than most people realize. Billions of tons of ancient rock and metal move silently through the solar system at unimaginable speeds. Some are mapped, many are not, and somewhere beyond the limits of current detection systems, the next unknown object may already be moving toward the inner solar system completely unnoticed. No warning sirens would echo across cities the moment it appears, and no perfect planetary shield waits in orbit to stop it. Humanity remains dependent on observation, prediction, and time, and if those fail even briefly, the consequences could arrive faster than civilization is prepared to handle. What if the greatest danger was never the asteroid itself, but the fragile system holding human civilization together? According to this alternative theory, The real crisis begins the moment institutions realize they may not be able to fully control public reaction, because fear spreads faster than facts. The deeper you move into the 3IA Atlas narrative, the less this story becomes about space, and the more it becomes about psychology, power, and survival. Supporters of the theory argue that once the original calculations revealed even a small possibility of planetary impact, the conversation inside government agencies and scientific organizations immediately shifted away from science alone to social stability. Imagine a classified meeting where analysts conclude there is even a tiny chance of a future extinction-level event. What happens next? Do authorities immediately tell the public everything? Or do they carefully control information to prevent panic, economic collapse, mass unrest, and geopolitical instability? According to this framework, that question sits at the center of the entire mystery. Publicly, institutions continue presenting asteroid tracking as a highly controlled and reliable science. Most official announcements emphasize that near-Earth objects are constantly monitored, and that no known asteroid poses a major threat in the foreseeable future. Mainstream science overwhelmingly supports that position, but supporters of the alternative narrative claim there is a massive difference between what is publicly communicated and what is privately discussed behind closed doors. They argue that uncertainty itself becomes dangerous. Modern civilization depends heavily on confidence, as financial systems operate, because people trust tomorrow will function normally. Supply chains remain stable because societies assume continuity, and governments maintain authority because populations believe institutions can manage future crises. According to this theory, even a small possibility of catastrophic impact could threaten that confidence structure if communicated carelessly. Imagine global headlines announcing a 1% chance of a civilization-altering asteroid strike within the next several decades. Even if the probability later drops to zero, the psychological damage would already be done. Markets could crash overnight, population movements could begin, and governments could face demands for answers they are unable to provide. The theory claims this is why strategic information control would become almost inevitable under such circumstances. Supporters believe subtle uncertainty already exists within long-term orbital predictions, especially when dealing with objects influenced by forces that cannot be measured perfectly. The Yarkovsky effect demonstrates how uneven heating on the surface of an asteroid causes tiny emissions that act like microscopic thrusters, slowly changing its orbit over decades. In space, weak forces acting over long periods can completely reshape trajectories, meaning an object predicted to miss Earth today could theoretically drift into a more dangerous path many years later. Mainstream astronomers account for these effects, but supporters insist the margin of uncertainty remains far larger than publicly acknowledged, especially when combined with gravitational keyholes. A gravitational keyhole is a very small region of space where Earth's gravity can redirect a passing asteroid into a future collision course during a later orbit. Missing the keyhole by even a small distance could send the object safely away forever, but passing through it could create a future impact decades down the line. This is where the 2068 scenario enters the narrative. The theory claims that if the approaching object experiences the right gravitational interaction during a close flyby, it could eventually return on a much more dangerous trajectory later in the century. Official scientific assessments strongly reject any confirmed impact prediction, but supporters of the theory argue that the real concern is unpredictability. Once an object disappears back into deep space after a close encounter, humanity enters a waiting game. Years pass, observations become harder, and tiny orbital deviations accumulate slowly in darkness beyond easy monitoring. Civilization could spend decades believing the danger has passed, while hidden changes continue unfolding silently across millions of miles of empty space. That idea taps directly into one of humanity's oldest fears: vulnerability to forces beyond our control. For thousands of years, civilizations looked toward the heavens with awe and terror, interpreting celestial disturbances as warnings of collapse. Modern science replaced superstition with mathematics, but it never removed the deeper truth that Earth exists inside a violent cosmic environment. Mass extinction events caused by impacts are proven by the geological record, showing how entire species vanished because of collisions with space debris. Dinosaurs dominated Earth for millions of years, yet a single asteroid ended their reign permanently. According to supporters of the 3IA theory, human civilization may simply be living through a temporary calm period between major cosmic disasters. Despite all modern technology, humanity remains surprisingly unprepared. Current planetary defense systems focus primarily on detection, cataloging objects, and refining trajectories. But stopping a large asteroid remains an entirely different challenge. Early steps like kinetic impact experiments are still limited demonstrations rather than guaranteed solutions. If a truly dangerous object were discovered with insufficient warning time, no globally proven defense system is ready for deployment today. The story is no longer about one hypothetical asteroid, but about the long-term survival of civilization itself. Some argue humanity's greatest weakness is psychological denial, preferring comforting certainty over difficult possibilities. The universe does not operate according to human comfort, and space remains filled with ancient debris moving at lethal speeds. Somewhere out there right now, another undiscovered object may already be moving toward us unnoticed. The most unsettling part of this scenario is the moment humanity realizes it might already be out of time, because the true crisis begins when the timeline becomes too short for any meaningful response. If you found this breakdown eye-opening and want to explore more hidden scientific theories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.